We're told that we live in the wealthiest nation on earth, and there exist all manner of indicators that measure the exchange and accumulation of monies. But are we happy? And how would we go about measuring that anyway? Gross national happiness ahead on Wide Angle. Happiness, said Aristotle, is the meaning and the purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. The notion even made the final edit in one of this country's founding documents, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, wrote Jefferson, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But do we ever measure our happiness? And if we did, troubled as we are by underfunded schools, a widening wealth gap, and political division, for starters, what would be revealed? Joining me today from her office near Montpelier, Vermont, to discuss both the wisdom of measuring our happiness as well as how we might go about it, is Ginny Sassaman. In addition to being a proud and dedicated grandmother, Ginny is the president and co-founder of Gross National Happiness USA, established back in 2009. Welcome to Wide Angle, Ginny.
Thank you. I love that Aristotle quote. I use it myself.
Thank you. You see that? Long ago, we knew the importance of happiness. Maybe somewhere in the middle, we got a little bit off track. So Ginny, I certainly alluded to indicators, measures, that gauge our wealth in my introduction. And one of the most widely known is the gross domestic product, the GDP. It became widely used after World War II, ostensibly to reduce the likelihood of a World War III by promoting economic stability and speeding reconstruction in a war-torn Europe. Viewers have likely heard of the GDP, but perhaps, like me, they have a limited understanding of exactly what it entails. So, to give us a working sense of at least where the idea of gross national happiness grows out of, a brief, sort of a broad stroke picture of gross domestic product and what it is that it seeks to measure.
Sure. So gross domestic product, or GDP, is actually, I think, quite simple. It just measures goods and services that are transacted between people or government. It's just measuring the exchange of money and goods and services. So the problem with GDP, one of the problems, is it's a very, very limited measure of well-being for a country or for a state, and it's often used as a stand-in for how well we're doing. I often hear it on the radio: the GDP is up, the GDP is down, or the GDP of this state is this, or the GDP of that state. Right. It's really rather meaningless.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that money could be being just exchanged among, say, 20 extremely wealthy people who are shipping money back and forth and back and forth. I mean, it's obviously more than that, but it's not at all a measure of how well the general populace is doing. Not to mention, it doesn't measure how the environment is doing. It's very limited. I like to compare it. If you're thinking of personal well-being, if you're thinking of personal health, so a lot of us wear pedometers or Fitbits. And I think of the GDP as being like my pedometer. And it's very good at what it measures. Yeah. It measures the number of steps I take.
Yeah.
But it does not measure whether I'm eating too much, drinking too much, getting enough sleep, getting hugs, in being outside in nature, if my mental health is good, if my heart is good. It's an indicator of health, but it's just one of many indicators.
Right. Certainly since World War II, GDP has become sort of a shorthand for overall economic health and the health, maybe even more widely, of the country as a whole. I suppose the logic behind that is that increasing levels of material wealth, which we could argue that it sort of does measure, are considered by many to be sort of synonymous with an improved standard of living and therefore presumably happier people. Does research bear out those beliefs?
Material well-being is important.
Right.
We all need enough food to eat, and we need heat in winter up here in New England.
Right.
We have many physical needs for our well-being.
Sure.
But there has been research, I believe it's called the Esalen paradox, that at a certain income level, the amount of money coming in to us as individuals or families, it makes us happy to a certain point,
Right.
but then it levels off, and it does not make us happier.
Right.
And greater material well-being does not make us happier. And in fact, at a certain point, it tips, and more material well-being can start to lead to greater unhappiness. And that number, it's a couple of years old, so it may be a little out of date, but it's lower than people would expect. It's only around 75 or 85,000 a year. After that, it does not increase individual happiness and well-being.
Okay.
You know, speaking in general terms, we're all different.
Sure.
And we'll experience things differently, but generally, it's capped.
Right.
And not only that, there also has been a lot of research over the recent years showing that GDP continues to rise, but happiness levels in this country are not rising at all. I mean, last year, and more data, there's a lot of data out there, but Center for Disease Control issued a report that suicide levels in this country were at an all-time high in like every age group, including children. And we know that the opiate epidemic is just ravaging communities everywhere, and that's coming from unhappiness. So, you know, we can look around and know we're not getting happier right now, but the GDP continues to rise, which shows it's not a good measurement.
Surprisingly, it strikes me as surprising, even back in the 1930s, when GDP was being developed as a measure, some sensed that it had a very specific purpose, but it shouldn't be used to make broad claims about the health of either social health or even economic health. And I guess one of the leading voices to make that claim was Simon Kuznets, and I apologize to him if I mispronounce his last name. He, as I gather, was the chief architect of the national accounting system in the US, as well as the GDP itself. And he cautioned against equating GDP growth, as you note, with social or even economic well-being. Today, it is widely used that way. So organizations like yours, Gross National Happiness USA, are offering alternative indicators, are encouraging us to rethink how we measure and what we measure. So if you would, what is it that Gross National Happiness is looking to have us measure that we've been missing?
We are, in the United States, we are modeling our G&H approach after the approach adopted in Bhutan, which is the country which pioneered the G&H concept. And in Bhutan, they came up with a series of 9 domains, or really policy areas where the government or a corporation or really any entity could make policy decisions affecting human happiness and well-being. So there are these 9 different areas, and together it's a very holistic picture. like with saying, are you getting enough sleep? Are you, you know, are you nurturing your relationships for personal happiness?
Right.
Looking at it on a systems level, it's not just about the exchange of goods and services, which is part of it.
Sure.
That's one of the domains, is economic vitality. But another one is psychological well-being. So how are you doing there? I don't think we're doing that great at the moment,
Right.
Overall as a country. Another one is trust in governance, which I think is at a low. The environment is in there, how we taking care of the environment. Education. So there's a series of 9 of these domains that we're working with right now, and we may change those. We're doing some research, and it may be that the domains that worked in Bhutan are not the ones that are going to work for us in this much more complex country.
Right.
But the basic theory is we need a set of holistic indicators. Just like any one of us individually need to look at a whole group of factors to measure our personal well-being, so too do we need to look at a whole group of factors to measure our national well-being.
Right. There may be viewers, Ginny, who would suggest that happiness as a measure, if not sort of frivolous, is at least not something that policymakers in Washington or state capitals should be focusing on. You have a response to a criticism like that?
Oh, sure. I mean, and I ran into it myself again on the personal happiness side, where people will say, "But isn't it self-indulgent? Isn't it selfish?"
Yeah.
And my response is always passionate. You know, increasing our own levels of happiness and well-being actually is one of the least selfish things we can do, because it's through that learning how to thrive, through that learning how to be our best, which we cannot do in isolation. It involves relationships. It involves giving to others. And when we really learn those practices, we are better citizens. We are better human beings. Whatever it is that any one of us is called to do on this planet, we can do it better by, self-care is one of the, buzzwords these days.
Yes.
But honestly, what good do we do people if we walk around and we're miserable?
Sure.
It doesn't help anybody.
Right.
It doesn't solve any of the very complex problems we have to solve.
Right.
On the systems level, isn't that what governments are for, theoretically? Aren't they there for our well-being? Isn't that the bottom line?
One would hope.
So I think it is the last thing from frivolous.
Yeah. On that note, Ginny, let's take a break and invite viewers to join us on the other side, where we'll discuss efforts to make happiness and well-being as measured as money.
We'd love to hear your feedback. Email us at wideangle@acmi.tv. For information about this episode or to view other Wide Angle episodes, visit us online at acmi.tv/wideangle.
Welcome back to Wide Angle. I'm Peter Bermudez, speaking today with Ginny Sassaman of Gross National Happiness USA about efforts to make happiness a policy priority. All right, so we spoke in the first half of the show, Ginny, about sort of the broad ideas of gross national happiness. But it should be pointed out, certainly, that gross national happiness is anything but speculation. As you referred in the first half, back in 1972, the Asian nation of Bhutan, sort of nestled up near the Himalaya, near Nepal, adopted the measure of gross national happiness. They have now 46 years of experience and data. So I'm wondering if you can speak, give us a sense of what that data and experience has to tell us. And also, you too noted the country's obviously very different. Yes, Bhutan is 800,000, I think, is the population, as opposed to our 340 million. Certainly, they are a Buddhist country, culturally very different. So there may be some things that aren't applicable here from their experience, but I imagine there are some things that are applicable and can transfer. If you can give us maybe a sense of those things.
Right. Before that, I want to just tell you that another country is adopting a G&H approach.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And it is not a small Buddhist country,
okay,
but New Zealand announced
Wow.
in January that New Zealand is going to use, they don't actually use the words gross national happiness,
Okay.
but that is the essence of their approach.
Okay.
They are adopting a well-being budget to guide all their policy and priorities.
Wow.
And they're very clear that they are using this holistic approach
Yeah.
for well-being in their government spending decisions. So the fact that a big, prosperous,
Sure.
somewhat multicultural country like New Zealand is
Yeah.
doing this now is, to me, extremely encouraging.
That's great.
Really great sign. So really a lot from Bhutan is applicable to us. I was speaking in Princeton last summer, and someone asked me, had we yet found anything that came up in our Happiness Walk research that was not covered by any of the domains?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was no. Everything was so far was. I've since run into suggestions that we should have a domain about animals and bringing animal well-being into the picture, which I think is a really important concept.
Sure.
But Bhutan, they're still trying to figure it out themselves.
Yeah.
But there's two examples from Bhutan that I think are helpful to us. One is when we measure well-being, let's say in Vermont, and there have been 2 studies measuring well-being in Vermont, one in 2013 and one in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that from time to time, you build up a record, and you can look at it and you can say, so people trust in governance really dipped here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at why that's the case.
Yeah.
Or psychological well-being is low. So what's going on, and what should we do about it? And the what should we do about it piece is key.
Yeah.
So in Bhutan, for example, this does just apply to them as a Buddhist country, but the example still is helpful.
Okay.
So they are a Buddhist country, and they found in their research that people weren't meditating very often.
Uh-huh.
This was of concern to them
Mm-hmm.
and their emotional happiness. So they created an intervention, which is to say they now have meditation as part of the curriculum in all their elementary schools.
Oh, interesting.
That's one way to use these measures, is to see where are we falling short
Right.
in the well-being and happiness
Right.
of our people. The other is, so they have these 9 domains, and within those 9 domains, they have something like 72 indicators. So when there are important policy decisions to be made, they can run it through this grid.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's not just, if we pass this bill, will it increase jobs? So, but it's also, will it increase jobs?
Yeah.
Will it increase inequality, or
Mm-hmm.
decrease it, or be neutral?
Yeah.
Will it improve the environment, or further degrade the environment, or be neutral? So you run the decisions through this whole grid,
Right.
and come up with a score, and then decide what you do from there. So that measured, layered approach to decision making, I think, could be really helpful.
As you note, there is Bhutan that has this lengthy experience. New Zealand will soon join them. U.S. states, Maryland and your own Vermont, have implemented a similar metric. It's called the Genuine Progress Indicator, GPI. Meanwhile, a number of other states in the U.S., Utah and Hawaii, I gather foremost amongst them, are moving toward these sorts of measures. From your experience, do you think this is an idea that is best implemented at the national level or more at the local level?
Well, I'd love to see it implemented at the national level.
Sure, of course.
That's not going to happen right away.
Right.
You know, this reminds me of the Pope, and the Pope who last year, maybe a year and a half ago, invited mayors over to have a big climate change meeting with them, saying it's up to you now.
Wow.
You know, you have to do this work because it's not going to happen at the national level.
Right.
I think that this is something that can happen, and in my opinion, should happen at every level. So at the moment, there are some cities and towns in the country who are also doing this.
Okay.
Santa Monica is probably the best example of that.
Yeah.
So I say great. You know, here in Vermont, because we're such a small state, it's easier for us sometimes to be a lab and test out new ideas and concepts. And this is still a very, very new idea. And it's a hard one for people to wrap their brains around, because I think we've so internalized this GDP, you know, in our own beings.
Right.
So we have to start where we can start. And so I think state and local level is great.
Right.
But honestly, the best place to start is with our own selves. And really, really trying to learn and understand and apply these concepts in our own lives. And then that will help us better to be voices for making the change in our towns, in our cities, in our churches.
Right.
Ultimately, federal government, absolutely.
Yep.
But it's not going to happen right away.
Right, right. One of the ways, I gather, that Gross National Happiness USA listens to people is via the Happiness Walk, yeah? And I gather shortly you and co-founder Paula Francis are going to go off on another leg of the Happiness Walk. It's an 8,000-mile odyssey around the country. If you would, tell us a little bit about it, and when we might see you in the greater Boston area, maybe.
So Paula is out there now.
Okay.
Paula is the one person in our organization who has walked every step of the way.
Right.
Paula right now is in Oregon along the coast.
Okay.
And she has walked close to 6,000 miles.
Wow. Okay.
I'm a mere Dave in Woods. I've only done about 300.
Okay.
But I'm about to join her to walk from Portland to Seattle.
Great.
I forget the rest. The walk is amazing because we wear these bright neon vests that say "serious about happiness," because we are. We're very serious about happiness. And we ask them all the same question, which is, what matters most in life to you?
Right.
Which, by the way, we do have this survey on our website, and anybody watching this can go there and answer that question also.
All right.
And what happens, I think that, we're not really in this country as a whole very good listeners. But we're out there as listeners, and we don't talk about our political beliefs or our religious beliefs. We will talk about what gross national happiness is all about, but we are there to listen. And when you listen to people talking about what matters most to them in life, the answers are amazing. People often cry. It's very poignant. It's very moving. Over and over, I have been surprised. I'll look at somebody and start forming some kind of judgment in my head about what might come out of their mouths, and something completely different comes out.
Right.
And it just over and over and over, blows me away.
Yeah.
What people have to say.
Right.
People never say money is what matters most.
Right.
I mean, let me amend that. There was one waitress in Louisiana
Yeah.
who said money, but only because she was a single mom and not earning enough money, and she wanted to provide for really quality education for her children.
Yeah.
So her answer really was her children's education is what mattered most to her.
Yeah.
And we talked to everybody, or we listened to everybody.
Yeah.
The youngest person who I have met along the walk was 6.
Mm-hmm.
And he was asked what matters most in life. This surprised me.
Yeah.
He said health, good health.
Uh-huh.
He had a friend at school who had asthma.
Ah.
So he was appreciating it.
Yeah.
The oldest person who I'm aware of so far once had dinner with Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt.
Wow.
So I can't remember her response, though. It might have been community. And as for Boston,
Yes.
Boston is going to be the end of the walk.
Ah, nice.
It's a little hard to predict when that will happen. I think sometime in 2019.
Okay.
So Boston should see a big celebration.
There you go. Good.
We'll be there. We'll all be happy and saying, this has been a long, long journey, especially Paula.
Sure.
Will probably be very.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we get there, we'll be sure to let you know.
All right.
And
Absolutely.
it'll be quite something.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Obviously, we could keep talking, Ginny. But I'd like to offer you the opportunity. If you sense that there's something that we haven't spoken of today that you feel would be useful for viewers to go away from this conversation with.
A couple of pieces. One is we do have on our website a charter for happiness.
Yes, good.
Our goal ultimately is to affect policy, but it takes a while. We have to build up support.
Yep.
So there is a charter for happiness which people can sign to help build support.
All right.
And our website's easy. It's just gnhusa.org.
Okay. Well, Ginny, I thank you so much for joining me today, for dedicating the past 10 years to gross national happiness, for giving us an idea to engage with. And I wish you certainly a good finish to the happiness walk and another fruitful 10 years, yeah?
Well, I'll see if I can hang in there.
I thank you.
Peter, thank you.
Pleasure. As we near the 50th anniversary of Robert F. Kennedy's assassination, it seems fitting that his words carry us out, as they aptly describe both how the GDP works and how it fails us. Quote, "Our gross national product counts air pollution and cigarette advertising, and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts special locks for our doors and jails for the people who break them. It counts the destruction of the redwood and the loss of our natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm and counts nuclear warheads and armored cars for the police to fight the riots in our cities, and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither the wit nor the courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile." To this, those like my guest today would say, exactly. We get what we measure, so let's measure what we value. On behalf of Ginny Sassaman of Gross National Happiness USA, I'm Peter Bermudez. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Wide Angle.